Hello, everybody. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are. I hope you're all having a wonderful day. All right. What are we looking at today? Overthinking, overthinking, overthinking. That's something about 70% of us are going through on a daily basis. So let's try to understand what is overthinking, understand the patterns, how does it really work in the workplace. Then when we get to the understanding, how can we really turn it off? This brain is becoming a pressure cooker, right? So sometimes the worst place somebody can be in is our own heads. I hope we all agree. What's really key in understanding overthinking is this isn't exactly worrying, this isn't exactly anxiety, while they are all part of this, but not entirely. So, in this session, we will go through the details of how each of these work for us and what's happening in our brain, what's really going on in our head, what are those thoughts that we keep going on in a loop in our head, and how do you go about. Okay, let's briefly jump into the session. Hope everybody is tuned to this. All right. So, who is an overthinker? Most of us are in our daily lives. I used to be a chronicle overthinker. I used to get really excited about everything. So, this isn't necessarily negative thinking, somebody who constantly worries, but somebody who pushes the brain activity way too much, right? So, somebody who's constantly thinking, like hundreds of times. Why do we really do that? So this is someone who's trying to be perfect, who is over scrutinizing someone, and we kind of imagine like hundreds of possibilities for just a simple conversation. I just briefly put some points on the slide to say this is somebody who's going to imagine like 205 possibilities for an appraisal conversation, right? Whereas there can just be about three or four outcomes in your conversation, right? And somebody who keeps rehearsing these thoughts, the conversation that he's going to have in an interview or with a manager or a colleague or within the family as well, right? There may be challenges that somebody's going through. You're constantly having those thoughts in the head and in a loop. Okay, you keep going to the past and to the future, to the past, to the future, and not really in the present. That's where overthinking happens. We are not in the present. We keep going back and forth, back and forth. So that is somebody who is an overthinker. What we can at times do is confuse the state of mind to somebody who is constantly worrying, somebody who's anxious, somebody who is in a flow state, somebody, let's say, who's trying to focus at the workplace. So those are not to be exactly confused with an overthinker. Okay, overthinking in a very simple definition is somebody overusing the brain. Okay, there are many parts of the brain that get activated when we start thinking about certain things. There are data processing parts in the brain, there are emotional processing parts in the brain. This is someone who will overuse all of this back and forth, and end up losing sleep. Okay, as part of that, we can end up in a worried state. So worrying or getting anxious, those are results of overthinking, not necessarily the same, right? So what really happens when we go through this at the workplace, we end up delaying things because we keep looking at the PowerPoint, what we have to deliver again and again and again. We are not really delivering it to our manager, we are not really delivering it to the client. We keep going back trying to be perfect. Okay, so we review it. Oh, that one particular thing, should that be added? Did I miss that one particular point? Okay, so what is a 5 slide conversation with the client, we make it to a 50-slide conversation, because we just know too many things, right? Some of us who are hyper focused on a variety of things, we want to include as many things as possible in our conversation. The client should know this, the client should also know this, the manager should know this, the manager should also know this. Oh, did I miss out that point? Oh, did I miss out this point? In this process, what's really happening is we are overcomplicating things. We are trying to assume expectations from the receiver and end up overcomplicating these things. And we are also imagining hundreds of possibilities where there are just about 3 or 4 possibilities. So when such constant activity, buzzing activity happens in the brain, it starts with the prefrontal cortex and then goes on to other parts of the brain, activating all the neurons. They are all firing back and forth, back and forth. They all get overactivated. At some point, they become really fatigued, right? So because we are getting overexcited. And when we are processing negative emotions and overthinking on that, it can get even further complicated. That will release cortisol, that will release stress hormones, and we become more fatigued, more tired. Then we develop a mental brain fog, right? Then we reach a stage of we are unable to make decisions, we are unable to get to a point, and we get stuck during conversations. We don't know what to talk next. In meetings, we just have too many things to say, but we are unable to say that one thing that is needed to talk to the client, talk to the management. And we are also blurring down boundaries between personal thoughts and professional thoughts. All these spaces are getting mixed up because the constant overthink. This is like opening multiple tabs on the laptop and trying to focus on one deliverable. So when you do Alt Tab, there are like 118 windows open, right? And when you're trying to deliver one Excel file to your manager, there are 25 files open. You just don't know which one you're doing a VLOOKUP, which one you're trying to copy the columns from and the rows from. And where I really mapping these data, you get stuck because there are just so many tabs open. Just like how your computer can hang when you have way too many windows open, your brain can also get stuck because we just have way too many windows open in our heads. So that's something to identify what is overthinking and how do you really identify when you are in that state of overthinking. I hope this is sufficient to understand how overthinking works. We will get to more details of what happens in the brain and what are those areas that this fires up. How do we understand the flow state and overthinking? And are they similar? Is there like a thin line between a flow state and overthinking? Let's get to the next slide. All right, so what are those brain areas that get fired up? There will be more, of course, but briefly, there is prefrontal cortex, there is amygdala, there is hippocampus, there is anterior cingulate cortex. These are the primary brain areas that get fired up during our overthinking activity in the brain. And there is like continuous evaluation of data. Okay, we keep pushing all the neurons to fire up back and forth to evaluate all the details that are in our head. And there is also a bit of emotional processing that comes from amygdala. We are trying to attach a few emotions to the data that's available. During this evaluation, what would somebody think? How will they receive us? Will this land well with them? Are they going to get upset? Are they going to be pleased with this information that we are presenting? All of this in an official professional space, we are thinking on our manager's behalf, our client's behalf. And then we are trying to recall what happened in the past or what could happen in the future. There is constant back and forth motion that happens, which we need to slow down by understanding this whole process. We are also trying to be perfect, right? So there is also error direction that happens. This is all happening in the imagination. This is all happening in our heads. Okay, not necessarily you're putting them in the PowerPoint that you're going to be presenting to your management, but these are all things that keep happening. Okay, all this data processing is happening in our heads. And there is rectification also that happens when, oh, I should have said this. Okay, this is what I'm going to be doing, but we are really not finalizing something. Okay, when we get to the stage of putting that in the PowerPoint, putting that in the email, we have kind of forgotten half the things that we have imagined. Okay, and then we have regrets of sending an email. Oh, I missed those 3 points that I should have added. Okay, so that's what happens when we push our brain way too much. And how is this different from a flow state, which is like an optimal performance state of mind? Okay, that's something will be very interesting to learn for all of us. There is a thin line between flow state and overthinking, which is cognitive optimal usage and cognitive overload. That's where flow state and overthinking really differs. In the first one, which is flow state, we are at our best. Our decision making is at its best. Of course, we can make mistakes during flow state. That said, we are really on our peak performance state of mind, because that's when we are releasing happy hormones. We have the right ifs and buts happening in our brain. We have the right reward system happening with all these hormones, making us feel better when we are engaged in an activity, but at an optimal level. We are not overusing the brain in this activity, which, if we push too much, which is sometimes habitual for some of us, when we keep consuming a lot of things, right? We end up being online way too much than what is required. At that time period, our flow state kind of starts blurring, and then we get to a cognitive overload stage where there is stress levels rising. This even applies to people who are trying to be positive as well. So this isn't just always negative thinking that is running in our head. This is sometimes happening even to people who are trying to be hyper positive. Okay, while positivity is good, hyper positivity is also going to impact our brain negatively. That is somebody who's trying to all the time consume something positive. I want to look good, I want to speak better, I want to present myself really well in front of everybody, and I'm constantly scrutinizing myself. Okay, I'm constantly thinking, am I doing the right thing? Am I making mistakes? No, I shouldn't. I'm stronger, I'm stronger. If you keep saying this, of course, these affirmations help you get better, but overdoing of that, you're consuming way too many things. Your brain cannot just handle that much cognitive overload of information, and that would result in dysregulation of mood, because we won't necessarily receive the rewards that we are trying to get from all these hyperactivity, hyper positivity, right? So that will then go for all the efforts the brain has put in for getting to that level of positivity, getting to that level of thinking, because I've used so much of my brain, right? My brain will start expecting rewards because I've put in so much thoughts. I've tried to structure it. I've tried to get into like 25 topics, all of this. Then my brain starts expecting rewards, which of course is not possible for us to provide. Then the brain gets stressed, the brain gets disappointed, and it will start evaluating losses. So this is like a constant loop, which a lot of us get into when we are in an overthinking state of mind. So let's get to some details of how do we really manage this. Before that, you should understand, are you really an overthinker, Or are you just getting anxious about something? Or do you worry? So these are all different states of mind that we spoke about. What's key is for you to identify what's really going on in your brain. So this could be you, the thinker on the left, who's calm, who's just sitting, who's trying to focus on one thing at a time, whereas the overthinker is just trying to pull his hair out. There's just too much happening. We have converted the brain into a pressure cooker. That's something we can all avoid if we are cognizant about the brain process, the thought process, and we slowly move to remediation, and then we can kind of tap into other positive states of mind. So let's spend the next about 15 minutes to see what can we really do to achieve better state of mind and stop the overthinking habit. To start with, understanding the process which we went through and see how we are able to activate several parts of the brain. And when the mental fog gets too much to process, what are those things that we can really do to get out of it? First is to start with acceptance. You are not God. You don't have to worry about hundreds of things going on in your organization, hundreds of things going on in your family. There are other members also in the organization. There are other members in the family as well. Don't over assume, don't overcomplicate the problems. Solve what is it in for today and let tomorrow wait. So you're not God. You don't have to worry about the entire planet. You don't need to boil the entire ocean to really come out of what we are thinking. Okay, so kind of accept you are one human being. You just need to think about that one day. So you're not God. And then look at what are those self talks that are happening in your head. While flow state or worrying or getting anxious about something or overthinking, these are all conscious states of mind. After some point, the self talk continues without our realization, without our awareness. Okay, it starts with our full awareness because these are all thoughts that come from our own brains. This is not happening at an unconscious level or not even at a subconscious level. These are happening at a conscious level. But when it becomes habitual, we will stop being fully aware of where we are, what we are thinking, and we start losing sleep. We start getting anxious. So that's like the result of overthinking. And we end up worrying. That is also a result of overthinking, right? So imagine not everything that comes in our head are real facts. A lot of them are just thoughts. I will call out one particular example from my life. Okay, actually, I can call out a few. I was about 25 years old. I had gone to my hometown, and my friend had come to drop me in the bus station. The roads were really bumpy due to the rains. It was heavily raining. And this friend who dropped me was a person who used to ride his bike really fast. Okay, irrespective of how good or bad the roads are, he would ride it really fast. He dropped me in the bus station. I took the bus, and then I had to come to another town to take the train back to Bangalore, back home. I was losing sleep the entire night thinking, what if this friend met with an accident because the roads were bad and he was a rash rider? Okay, that entire night I didn't sleep. I was overthinking what all could happen. Okay, that's some time period when I didn't have my mobile phone with me. I was overthinking all of this. Okay, this was one extreme example. This is real that happened to me. And much later, when I think about it today, what a fool have I been, right? So this isn't really a scenario that I should have, push myself to overthink, losing the entire night's sleep. Okay, I should have just trusted my friend. He would know how to ride his bike. He will reach his home safely. That's a thought I should have put on affirmation to myself, but I didn't do that. I kept overthinking. And at the workplace, there are many times that I have to present financials to my partner, to my engagement partner, or to the client, that I have to present something. And there are challenges, right? There are escalations that we have to deal with. And sometimes there is a revenue dip, sometimes there are details that we have to cover during our conversation. I'm overthinking about it. A lot of times, what I have found, in fact, 9 out of 10 times, I imagine 10 problems, 10 outcomes. Whereas when I actually have the conversation with my manager or the client or the senior management, it is fairly easy. Okay. When we have the right facts put together, when we structure our thoughts, when we present it with enough data, the outcome are not as bad as we thought. It isn't as bad as I imagined. This has happened several times. Last year, I had many such client presentations. That's when in my role, I started doing more conversations with senior clients and top management. I really, were overthinking initially. And then somewhere I started becoming mindful of my thoughts. Then I put an end saying, Arvind is no longer an overthinker. Okay. I used to be proud of overthinking before. In a lot of my conversation with my friends, I used to say, I'm a habitual overthinker. I always overthink. So that used to be like a tagline for myself. I was very proud of being an overthinker. Then I said, I stop here. And then what happens? Have the problems gone away? Not exactly. Life is filled with problems. Workplace will be filled with challenges all the time, but there can only be two or three outcomes for every challenge, right? But we end up imagining 200 outcomes. So let's make it a habit to write it down. And probably it may sound really ridiculous to say, but schedule a time to worry. Okay, if at all you want to worry about something, if you want to overthink about something, schedule some time, which means the rest of the day you are adding to full productivity, or just schedule for half an hour and say, this is some time I will think over matters. In that half an hour, structure your thoughts. And when you write down, when some of you may have the habit of journaling, others start just writing down your thoughts. The moment you get to a pen and paper, half of the problems are solved. Why? When you write down, you cannot just scribble everything, right? You have to give it some structure. That way, it becomes somewhat easier for you to approach this whole problem. And practice minimalism in your thoughts. When I say minimalism, like we said, 250 tabs open, 25 thoughts running in parallel about household matters, and there are 35 things running about my next year promotion, what will I do with my bonus, what am I going to do with my EMIs, all of that. Relax, write it down. That way you'll get a structure to this. What's also happening in all of this talks, self-talks happening in our head in a loop is we're not talking to the right person to seek feedback. Okay. When I'm overthinking about a conversation I'm going to have with my boss and it gets too much, I'm unable to process it now. How do I go about? What should I do? Might as well talk to the boss, isn't it? Why don't I just ring up, tell my boss, hey, I'm overthinking this. I do this sometimes. Say, hey, there are just too many things buzzing in my head. I'm unable to process. Can we just have a conversation? And even if it is with your client, Just have a preliminary conversation to say, hey, these are all the things I'm thinking that we should be talking about in our next conversation. Can we just go through this? I'm just trying to structure it. Do you have like 15 minutes to go through this? Do that. Instead of waiting for the D-Day and crush a cookie ahead, go slow, talk to the person that you're overthinking the conversation all about. That will also solve most of our problems. And then seek timely feedback. That way, you're validating on a timely basis. Okay. Not validating, not getting feedback on a timely basis will end up we assuming too many things. Okay. And then looking at talking to your colleagues, talking to your friends, it's okay to just share something that you're overthinking about. Okay. Have a friend you can confide into and talk to that person. Say, hey, there are just too many thoughts that I'm having. Can we just go through this? Have one or two proper rehearsals than 200 rehearsals in your head that are not really structured. Okay, because those are not going to help you with peak performance, but having a structured conversation with a colleague or your boss or a friend or even people at home, it can be um, a spouse, your sibling. Sometimes I even talk to my son. He's just 8 years old, but I talk about some problems with him. I talk finance with him. He's able to understand, thankfully. And he may not always give easy solutions, but it still helps us structure our thoughts. Okay, so that's where we need to really get to and be mindful of what's going on in our head. Practice meditation. For those who don't meditate yet, spend at least 10 minutes a day, okay, to meditate. Practice mindfulness. Stay calm, and you're not God. Okay. I will try to wrap this session with a saying: we don't have to solve all the problems in this world. We don't have to. Don't keep your shoulders way too heavy that burdens you so much that you're unable to deliver what is at a bare minimum expected out of you. Okay. You're important for your family, you're important for your career, you're important for your team, you're important for yourself. Don't overcook thoughts in your head. Brain is a beautiful organ when you put it to good use, when you activate the happy hormones and really understand what your brain really wants out of you. So stay focused, understand what's going on in your head. Don't go into a loop of thoughts. Structure your conversations, build strength. Okay, things are not going to be easy all the time. So build strength, get stronger, become resilient, and also have utmost humility. I think we are kind of at the end of the session. I will just have this on screen for about a minute for everybody to consume. And then we'll get to the last slide about the next session tomorrow. There are links about the session tomorrow. If you're not part of the Facebook community or the WhatsApp community, sign up. The details of tomorrow's session are shared on LinkedIn. Do share and watch out for a session on mid-career crisis. How do you really balance your personal aspirations and family expectations? Stay tuned for 8 p.m., 25th October, Friday, tomorrow. I know it's Friday. You may all have something exciting planned, but don't miss out this session. It's going to be really fun and interesting and enlightening. Okay. Thank you all for this opportunity to speak with you on overthinking. I hope you take some notes from this session and you have some key takeaways. I hope you all really enjoyed this session. Thank you.